Okay, so let's move on to activity three now. And in activity three, this is going to generate, provide an automatic response, which is not exactly what it sounds like. It'd be cool if it were, and maybe I can try to figure out a way to get that to happen. But um, basically, what they're doing is a review is written. It's filled with words, and obviously, but some of those words have an asterisk before them. And what they want us to do is to be able to write code that will um, replace the words with an asterisk with a random positive or a random negative, and then eventually we'll get to um, a bit of both. So it ends up looking, I think, a little Mad Lib like, and but it's still pretty cool. All right, so it's basically string manipulation, a little bit little involved, I guess, uh, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of neat. So there are a couple of things that we need to do in terms of the files to get things set up. If you open up the Consumer Lab code, so here are the files that are in there. We've been editing the source code of the review.java file. Clean sentiment, those are the 6,000 words that have various values. And then there are these two guys. These are text files, and they're empty. The ones that you downloaded are empty. So I haven't done the negative one yet, but it's just an empty file. So what I'd like you to do, what you have to do actually, is to go out and generate a bunch um, of words that have a negative connotation. Um, and you can just think them up off the top of your head. If you want to pull them off the other list, you can. Here's 25 and again, it's just going to be 25 words that are all lowercase, by the way, and then are going to get um, added or that we'll pick randomly from those. So that's one thing that you need to do. You need to do both of those for the negative and the positive adjectives. The other thing is, so you'll notice that I have two simple text. Um, and that was just so that I could do these videos and have it's basically just a small modification that needs to happen. So simple text looks like this. It's just a simple sentence, and you'll notice that it has these asterisks before various adjectives. And so what we're going to do is we're going to replace these words, quick, brown, and lazy, with positive words. So we'll see how that's going to look. So you do need to modify the simple text file so that it has that, and it doesn't really matter what you're choosing. You do need to have adjectives that have asterisks before them. That's really all that we're going to be testing for right now. There's one other change that needs to happen, and I don't know if this was oversight on the College Board's part or exactly what, but there's a line in review.java that is outputting all of the positive adjectives. And so if you don't want that to show up, then you have to comment that line out. So let's start by just taking a look at that just real quick. And so up at the top, they don't have a constructor. It's just when the class gets called, that's when all of these things, these array lists get made. And so it's going to create that. Because all of these things are static, then that's why it doesn't have a constructor. But what they're doing is they're reading from positive adjectives.text, which is all fine and well. That's how we're going to load up all the positive and all the negative bits. But this line here is not commented out. I did it because I noticed that, oh, all of those words are being done. So that's what's happening as it's reading from the file. It's going to as long as there's another string that it can read, it's going to continue to read, and then they're outputting what temp is every single time, and then it gets added to this array list of positive adjectives. That's this guy up here. So that's one line that I noticed is going on. The other line, so text to string. Believe we are going to need to do that in this on this guy, where we don't need that. This is another one that is important, and the code here is a little bit strange. So I believe it was on Thursday's assignment on the sentiment val that we would extract a word and there may be punctuation that was happening. And so what this is doing is it's stripping out the punctuation from that. So that was called in sentiment val when we wrote that. What's interesting here is that, well, what if, so I have a word, maybe it's an adjective, or I have a word that I want to replace, and it has some punctuation at the end, whether it's a comma or something else. And when I replace it with a new one, I still want that punctuation to be there. And this is a little interesting what they're doing. They're going to the end of the word. Okay, that makes sense. So there's a word and it's got some punctuation at the end. You would think, well, I just pull out that last character, but what if it's a period quote mark? That's two pieces of information. So what's happening here is they're working backwards, starting at the last character that's there. And if it is not, that exclamation point means not. If it's not a letter or a digit, it's going to take that and create a string that probably is going to be pretty short. It's probably going to be one character. But if there was a whole series, if it was ... it works backwards and adds all those dots together, and then returns punc as a string. So we're going to get that. Here's all the punctuation. We'll get the new word, and then we'll add punc at the end. So the get punctuation is a method that we are going to be using in this case, because we want the punctuation to be there. And I think that's it. This one, the get random positive adjective, that's a nice method. They're pretty simple. We could have done that. They gave it to us. So it's pulling one out from the positive list. It's doing the same thing. And again, so how are they doing it? Math.random times however many there are. And again, that's going to give us a number that's going to be the index within the range of that array list. And then we're going to pull that one out. We're going to get that and return it. So that's what's happening on those guys. Okay. So enough of that. Let's get to writing the code. I am giving you this line. So this is perhaps what I would recommend that you use in main. And the name of the class is called Fake Review. Here's the signature up here. So it's returning a string. It takes a file name. That's a string. And so the next thing that I'm asking you to do over here is to, again, make sure that you've got the simple text with this, get the signature, and then write that algorithm. So take a moment, do the algorithm, and then you can compare it to what I came up with. Okay, so here's my algorithm to this project. So here's my string. I'm going to be going through, and I think what the College Board does on their solution is they look for space, and they're going to pull out every single word and then look to see, is the first character of the word an asterisk, and if it is, then okay, then we'll go to that. I decided to do things a little bit differently. My solution was we're only replacing those words that have the asterisk. So that's what I'm going to look for. I'm going to look to see is there an asterisk there, and if there's not, then I'm not replacing anything, right? So I'm looking for asterisks. The College Board went word by word by word by word by word. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So multiple ways to solve the problem. So here's my solution to this. First thing I got to do is I'm going to store all the contents of that file as a string variable. So I am going to call the text to string method. Then I'm going to create an empty string. That's the answer. So as I start to stuff everything, the old text with the new words, that's all going to be put into a single string called answer, and then ultimately I'm going to be returning that answer variable back at the end. So I'm going to loop, and I'm going to loop until there is not an asterisk found. So what I want to do then is, so I'm going to have an integer variable that's going to keep track of what is the index of the asterisks. Then I'm going to concatenate from the beginning of that the string, the text file basically, to the asterisks. That's going to get, so that's everything up until the word that I want to replace. Then I'm going to find at the index of a space after. So I want to get just that whole word. So I want to pull that word out. And so I need to now do another index of to find out where's the space after that. Maybe there's not going to be, maybe it's the last word, for example. That's a possibility. I'm going to store the punctuation in a temp variable. And then when I'm done, I'm going to grab it, get a new word, and then store that, add the punctuation to the end of that if there is any. Keep doing that. When I get to the last word, I'm going to take the remainder of that expression and then put that into at the end of answer, and that should be my whole string. So listening to myself talk, not sure that was real clear, but perhaps the words that I wrote make a little bit more sense. Maybe your algorithm makes more sense even still. Okay, so let's get to code. Let's start to write that up. So now that we have that plan, all right. So basically what I want to do to begin with is I first want to convert that, the file name, and I want to put that in a string that I can then manipulate around a little bit. So mine is going to be, so string, I'm going to call it file text. And again, this is a static method from the review, in the review class, and it's text to string. And it's going to take file name as the parameter. So now file text is all the contents of the file called file name, or simpletext.txt. I'm going to create a string answer, and I'm going to put nothing in it, an empty string. By doing this, it's tempting to put just a semicolon here, but you won't be able to concatenate if you do that. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm a string, and it's initialized to nothingness. That now it looks happy. It's barking because I'm not returning anything at this point. The other thing, and this was not included in my algorithm, but I need to know where those asterisks are. So it's an int. It's going to be the index. So I'm going to call this aster index. And I'm looking for that in my string file text. So file text dot index of quote, asterisk, close quote. There we go. So what is that going to do? That's looking inside file text for any asterisks. If there are none, well, that's pretty easy. I just return the whole thing. Otherwise, but most likely there are. That's the whole nature of the problem. So I'm going to loop. I don't know how many there are. One thing I was thinking of before was I could count all the asterisks that are there and then loop that many times. That's another solution to the problem, but we'll do this as a while loop. So while asterisk index is greater than -1. That means that, that it is contained somewhere in that in file text. All right, so what do I want to do when all that happens? Well, so I know that there's an asterisk, there's a word I've got to replace. I need to know where does that word end. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to acquire where is the next space. So int next space is going to equal file text index of, and that is a space. All right, so now I know that there's an asterisk, and now I'm looking to see where's the space. Now it could be that the last word has an asterisk before it. That's a possibility. I need to be prepared for that as well. The other thing I want to do is I have answer, and I found an asterisk somewhere down the line. I don't know quite where that is, but I know that I can go from 0 to I can create a substring starting at the beginning of file text and go all the way to aster, and that's going to be, that's where the asterisk is. So one before that is probably going to be a space, but I'll take the thing right before that, whatever that might happen to be. Could be punctuation maybe. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna take the first part of file text and put that into answer. So answer is going to plus equals, all right? So I'm going to concatenate and assign. That's what the plus equals is going to do. File text substring. I'm starting at the beginning of that string, and I'm going to go all the way to aster index. Right? And what is this doing? So I know that I have an asterisk in there. I'm going to be replacing that word. Everything from the beginning until the asterisk I can put into answer. The other thing, I forgot to mention this, that I'm doing similar to what my approach to the previous question is, I'm taking that string and I'm going to keep truncating it. All right, so when I get to the asterisk, we'll deal with that word, find the space, and then I'm going to cut out everything else. So now that I know I've got next space, all right, so we'll deal with that space, and then I can move on after that. So I'm going to keep truncating file text, and so file text is going to be real long at the beginning. I'm going to keep cutting it down and down and down and down until finally there are no more asterisks left, and possibly nothing left of asterisks, and so, or nothing left of file text, and we'll be done. So I'm truncating file text as we go through this. That's that might have been left out of my algorithm. The other thing I need to do is I need to worry about punctuation. So I want to get the punctuation. So that's a string. I'll call it punct, and I'm not going to get it right at this moment because it depends on whether or not there is any text. I'm sorry, if this is the last word or not. And so if it's, I don't want to be doing that if there's extra text. So I'm going to create that. I'm going to put nothing in it to begin with. So what I want to do now is figure out. So I know that there's an asterisk. I don't know if this is the last word of file text. So I need to address that part first. So I'm going to. The easy part is, let's say it's Quick Brown Fox. Goes on and on. I found the first one. There's going to be a space in there, so I know that there's a given word that I'm going to be extracting. So because I did this, I've got next space. So if it's the last word, that's coming back -1. And if it's not -1, similar to this aster index, then I know that there is it is or is not the last word. So I'm going to start by saying this is the last word. All right. So if next space is equal to -1, okay, that means this is, or there's an asterisk. I'll put it that way. Is before last word in file. Right. Okay, so it's the last word. It's the last word. I still want to be able to get to deal with punct. I want to get any punctuation. Maybe it's the last word. There's no space at the end, but there's a period, or there's a period quote, or 3 exclamation marks, something like that. So I want to get all of the punctuation, and that's really easy. That's get punctuation. And I got to pass. It does need a parameter. The file text takes a string. Somewhere takes a string. That's a word. So what's the word? What's the text that I want to do? So I know that there's no space at the end, so it's the last word. So the word that I want is all of file text. Right, so there's no more spaces in that. I've already made that determination by this condition up here. So, okay, well, that's good. I got file text, got the punctuation done. The other thing I need to do is, so I've got the last bit of that. And the other thing that I want to do is, sorry about that, I got lost in my thinking there. So the last thing I need to do is, I've got the last word. There is some punctuation that I need that I've hung on to. I still have access to that. And the only other thing I need to do here is eliminate the rest of file text. And I paused there because I was thinking, oh, well, if I do that, then maybe there's extra stuff, but this is the last word. All right, so this is the last word. There's an asterisk before it. So I'm done with file text. I'll be getting a new random positive integer, and file text is going away. All right. So when there's an else that I need to do, but after we're done with that, I'm going to take answer and I'm going to concatenate plus equals. I want to now get that random adjective, and that is called random positive ADJ, no parameter. So again, let's assume that's the last word. file text, not tile. Then later. And maybe you meant random positive. Yes, that looks like a positive. There we go. All right, so again, I found there's an asterisk before the last word. I'm storing the punctuation after the last word. If there's none, it comes back as an empty string. I'm going to replace, whatever's an answer, I'm going to add a random word to that. The next thing, answer, I'm going to concatenate plus equals punct. And that is almost it. The only thing left to do is, well, I've got this whole else thing going on that I need to solve, but the only other thing I have to do here is I've got aster index and it found one. I've got to find the next one. And so aster index is going to equal file text dot index of an asterisk. What if it's the last word? Well, if it's the last word, this is an empty string, and index of an empty string is going to come back -1, and that's going to break this condition, and so we're going to be out of that loop. All right. So that kind of works us through if there's only one asterisk and it happens to be the last word. What if it's not, though? That means that we know that there's an asterisk, and we also found that there's a space that's there. So it's not, that next space is not equal to -1, meaning that it's a number that where we found a space, right? So in that case, I'm going to do, so this is an else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extract that word out from my from file text. So I'm going to do, this is just going to be a string temp, and I'll call it word. And that's file text. And it's going to be a substring. And where am I starting? Well, I'm starting, aster index is where there's an asterisk. So I'm going to go one letter after that. Aster index 1. And where am I stopping? Well, I'm finding the next space. I want to extract that word. So that's going to be next space. You might think, well, shouldn't you subtract 1 because that's where the space is? But remember, substring with 2 parameters moves back anyway. So I'm good. That is just the word. Now what I can do is similar to what I did up here. Here I got the punctuation at the end. Now that I have word taken care of, punct is going to be review. That's kind of annoying. Get punctuation. And it's going to be word. And extract the punctuation off of that. That means that because I've declared it punct up here and I'm modifying it in these 2 if statements, I can still come back down here and acquire that. And Right, so then the only other thing left, so up here, you notice that, remember that we took file text and we said, well, there is no space after that. That means that this is the last word, so we're going to set file text to nothing. In this case, I have a space. There's other words that follow that. So this is where I'm going to be truncating file text. So file text is going to equal file text itself, but it's going to be a substring. This is going to be with only one parameter. I'm going to go from a particular point the rest of the way. So it's only one parameter. Well, where do I want to go? I have next space. Next space is not -1, so that means that there is a space. I want to go one character after that. What if that were um, a space? It's still going to be just fine in this. So it's going to be next space +1 semicolon. So in the event that there's two spaces next to each other, it would extract that first one. But when I went to that next index, it would still come together the way that it's supposed to. I just didn't explain that at all very well. All right, and I think that is all that we need to do. All right, so I've taken care of if it's the last word. Here's what I'm dealing with. Getting the punctuation. I had to do this extra line here because there may be punctuation at the end of that given word. That's why I had to do it this way. Now that I have punched in both of these situations, I'm adding it at the end. Then I'm going to be creating that, and yeah, and so this is the other thing. So when there's another asterisk, this is how I'm joining up all the words prior to that asterisk. All right, and so because I keep doing this guy here, because I keep shortening file text, I'm always going to be starting at position 0 and then going to one less than wherever the asterisk was. And then when I'm done with all that, we're good. And I believe there's one last thing that needs to happen. So that what if I find the last asterisk, but it's not the last word, and there's no more. So there's still part of file text to go that doesn't have an asterisk next to it. I want to be able to take the end of that and add it to my answer. So when I'm done with my while loop, that's just finding all of the asterisks. I've changed all the asterisks, so all those adjectives are now positive. And the last thing I want to do is I want to take the remaining words that don't have asterisks and add them to answer. So there's one more bit that needs to happen, and that's answer plus equals concatenate, and it's going to be file text. That seems weird, but it seems like, well, wait a second. If it's not the last word, then that hopefully makes some sense. If it is the last word, what if it's the last word? There's nothing there. If there's nothing there, I'm concatenating nothing. So it's doing this extra line. I'll be taking all of the words that don't have asterisks next to them, putting it at the very end of answer. And the very last thing that I need to do is return answer. Yeah? With me? Kind of think I'm talking to myself, but the way things go these days. All right, so I think that's it. Does it compile? Compiles. So down below, this is here I'm calling simple text. That's the one that has quick brown fox. and I'm calling the fake review of that. And then I'm going to output revised text, and then on a new line, here is that answer. There's something a little bit strange with this version in that it seems to always run the last terminal window. So let's back things up and see if I can get this to, there we go. Get this to go. Of course there is. Okay, yeah, there was a bug. So I have an out of bounds error, and everything's going along just fine, except that this is when I am looking at Word here, and I'm trying to extract the word. And what's happening is that looks like, so I'm beginning at 5, that's where the asterisk is, and then it's the next space. That's the problem. The problem is that it didn't find the right space, and that's because I screwed up. This guy up here is finding the index of the next space, which is great, except for the fact that I want to find the first space after the asterisk, right? So there's a whole bunch of words prior to that, and that's what was happening. So it found the space, index of space is way at the beginning of that string. That's not the space I'm interested in. I want the space after the asterisk. So there's two versions of index of, all right? There's one, if you just take the string, it's going to tell you what's the index of that given, and that's going to be where it's the first instance of that. Well, again, as I said, that's going to be at the beginning of file text. I want to start it after, so I know that there's an asterisk in here. I want to start it after index. Right? That says find the first space after this index, the asterisk index, and that'll be the end of the word. Then we should be all fat and happy. Let's compile that. That's a good sign. Let's try it again. I'm going to X out of this one. And right click and run. What do you know? Now it did screw up on the spaces. So I got to add a space in there. That's right. I forgot that. So I'm getting the word and I'm adding it. So agreeable, loyal fox jumps over the dynamic moon. So I'm checking, and so we'll fix that right now. What is happening here? Here I've got the punct, and that's all good. What I'm going to do here is that I know that there are other words associated with that. So I'm going to take punct. I'm going to concatenate a space. I don't need to do it here because it's the last word, right? So I'm going to get the punctuation if there is any. If there's none, it comes back empty, and now I'm going to be concatenating a space. So if there is punctuation, I'm going to be adding a space after the punctuation. If there's no punctuation, I'm just going to be adding a space to punct, and then that should take care of that problem of no spaces. So get out of that. Come back over here and run. And there you go. An imaginative, energetic fox jumps over the sincere moon. All right. It's now after midnight. Hope you're doing well. I'll be available for office hours tomorrow if you're interested. Take care. See you later.